Thank you, Jennifer and Amanda and Jordan for all the organization of yesterday and today. Probably would need my slides at one point, but okay. So I'm actually, I like to move when I talk, so I try to hold my hands as much as I can. And another difference is that I actually use children and families in my research, so I'll try to connect it as much, and very grateful. And the last point is, doing it in 15 minutes will be a challenge, and I noticed that you took 2 more minutes, and I appreciate it, because I'm intending to take more. You're going to have to really stop. That's true. So I just want to start, with the questions for what resilience, and it's very complicated to talk about it. And for specifically, can I move with this? All right. It's a very complicated question because, especially when you talk about human behavior, and when you talk about research, because as scientists, even social scientists, we try to quantify behaviors. We try to quantify everything, and even quality of relationship quality. Which everything that we don't think of as quantity, it needs to be quantified in order to do it. And we talk about resilience. It brings a challenge. I did a hybrid definition that is based on Cicchetti, Luther, Michael Unger, who's sitting here, and others. And it says the process of thriving through and post-adversity or early life stress. So in order to see, so what you're already figuring out here, that you need to have adversity for someone to be resilient. He or she needs to experience adversity. But they also need to thrive. It needs to be over time. And just defining thriving is very difficult. Is it lack of psychopathology? Is a child that doesn't have depression, is he resilient? She is resilient? That's a complicated question that we talk about. And which brings the need to use multi-level analysis, outcomes, and mechanism. And what does it mean, multi-level? And I will talk about it. And then the intersection between risk protective and promotive factors are kind of converging into the need to explain what do we mean by evolutionary lens. And this is where I'm going to try to bring something that I believe is coming new in resilient science, which means that we're going to look at the resilience phenomenon or process from an evolutionary perspective, and we will see what does it mean. Lastly, I will bring a new concept that is borrowed from toxicology. It's not that new. It was coined in the 1800s by a pharmacologist, but it can be well translated into behavior and social science too. So just in terms of early life stress, just the word early life stress is complicated, right? And it's probably better to take definitions from biological science because they can reduce it into a more containable definition. And just bringing from Sapolsky definition, just perceive it as a threat to homeostasis. And if we are feeling under threat, we are experiencing some sort of stress. Now there is a distinction between acute stress, stress that we all experience, like now that my PowerPoint went off, and chronic stress, which we often call it toxic stress. It's an unbearable, continuous stress that can cause a range of dysregulation, biological and psychological. So, when we establish that, how do we move to model of developmental perspective? When children or humans experience all type of early life stress or adversity, they can either resiliently overcome that or develop risk behaviors. And it's the intersection between the two that you're trying to pinpoint where is resilience is emerging. So how is resilience is related to all of that? I'm going to try to do it by, go back. I'm going to try to do it by showing 6 studies from my lab, hopefully in time. So one thing I really want to bring in here is, I'm not going to play this video, I don't have time for that, but I want to talk about a minute. Everybody, or maybe not everybody, but every psychologist at least, is familiar with the marshmallow task. So the marshmallow task is you're going to a very, a toddler, and you tell them, I'm going to give you 1 marshmallow, but if you're willing to wait 10 minutes, I'll give you 2. Now, as done by Mitchell's in the 80s, and it found to predict adult successful life for years. So it's a great thing, right? In 2013, Celeste Kidd, a computational neuroscientist in the University of Rochester, I was doing a postdoc at the time there, she came with a nice way to contest this hypothesis. She brought the kids and did the marshmallow task in 2013, but she did a little environmental manipulation. She introduced unreliability. She kind of introduced an environment that is unreliable by telling the kids, or 50% of the kids, promising them something, I think it was crayons, and then not following up with the promise, kind of disappointing them. And for the 50%, it was the usual one. 1 marshmallow, if you wait 10 minutes, I'll give you 2 marshmallows. So for kids that were disappointed, where the researcher came in and said, I'll get you some fancy crayons. Wait a minute. Come back, say, sorry, we ran out. This group actually showed preference for 1 marshmallow after that. In other words, it's kind of obvious when you say it, right? Because why would I wait for the 2nd marshmallow, right? Now, thinking from an evolutionary developmental perspective, Charles Darwin said, it's not the strongest or the smartest that survives. It's the one that is able to adapt. And we constantly, in my field, are very judgmental. If people don't behave in the way we expect, in poor neighborhoods, we're thinking they're impulsive, they're wasting their money, they're taking drugs, and we are thinking in a lot of terms. One thing what we can be invited to think about is that they're actually adapting to the environment, and these immediate responses that we think is impulsive are actually adaptive for them to survive. Even being violent could be the right behavior for specific dangerous contexts. Thinking about rearing environment, thinking about neighborhoods that are that have a lot of crime in it. So, extending on this work, one thing I really wanted to do when I arrived at the University of Georgia is start to test that, because in my field, in human development and family science and development psychology by training, you are constantly reminded there are multi-level determinants of human behavior. Stress is not just how your peers treated you. Or your behavior is not a byproduct only of your parenting. If your parents are trying hard, but in an environment they experience extreme discrimination, then that can spill over to the family level. So that's what we call level. And these levels are communicating with each other, and the idea came from Bonfer-Brenner, Cornell University, that create models that explains this integration between, the communication between the levels and its effect on human behavior. Now, in this talk, I'll continue to talk about this impulsivity, but when you think about impulsivity, it's a broad term. We were talking about delayed gratification with the marshmallow. There is sometimes immediate behaviors, and sometimes it could be impulsivity that is about your ability to orient towards the future and have ambition. And maybe kids like that can do better. I will start from a paradigm from neuroeconomics that I work with, because when I work with adolescents and young adults, it's not like toddlers. I cannot do the same experiments with marshmallow. I mean, I could, but it's not that difficult. So there is a paradigm, it's called neuroeconomics, that integrates principles from psychology and economics. And what is done there is you are measuring delayed gratification by a concept that's called delayed reward discounting. How fast a reward loses its value based on its temporal distance. In other words, if I tell you $1,000 now, or $10,000 in the end of the month, many of you will say $10,000, but if I start creating a curve, temporal curve, and when I say $1,000 now, in the end of the day, $1,000 and, you know, 1,005, then you will say, well, give me the 1,000, I'll just forgive about 5, I need to go catch a flight. In other words, the value of the rewards is changing temporarily with the temporal distance that you put. So doing this idea is you are able to, you know, kind of gauge or quantify delay gratification in a more tangential way that applicants to adolescents and young adults. This paradigm has been done with rats too. We remove the nucleus accumbens, areas in the brain that are associated with reward sensitivity. There is differential discounting curves, meaning you can make rats more impulsive just by removing some areas. So I will start as level 1, and we talk about levels. We think about levels is going into the molecular levels. You know, you can go cellular, outside, human, personality, family, neighborhood, right? State, policymakers is another level that is very, very important. I'll start with fMRI studies. One recent that I just published, the lab, I had to say my lab and I, and what we look here is the effect of early life stress in the form of socioeconomic hardship on delay reward discounting, like how delay gratification is coming about. And we wanted to see if you know, working memory and emotional reactivity are associated with this in this path. You know, how people experiencing socioeconomic hardship, if that affects about the way that they are evaluating rewards or delay rewards. And if that has any association with their working memory performance. So the model goes like that. And the idea is, maybe when you're thinking about your, you know, you're making a decision. When youth, we're trying to study youth and trying to see how they make decisions that will be better for them, you know, lack of drugs, lack of risk behaviors. Maybe when they kind of looking at the cost and the benefit, there is something in a cognitive functioning that affects this cognitive mission, this cognitive decision, this rationality. And maybe being emotional is, in that sense, can interfere in this process. So we ran this. I'm going to skip a little bit because I think I'm taking. Ooh, I'm way behind. So we ran this model, and lo and behold, results in a nutshell. Yes, people that experience cumulative socioeconomic hardship are having working memory performance reduced, and that in turn predicts risky decision making only among those that are very reactive emotionally. So you can conclude for that targeting emotional reactivity. But then I wanted to move into impulsivity that is a little bit less reduced. I mean, how about thinking about the future, a more motivational? And there is a construct for that. It's called future orientation. And in this study, what we took 1,000 families from from a public data set called the long scan, And we wanted to see whether this future orientation that has been found to protect children that experience adversity from being impulsive later on as adults, or inclined to use drugs and participate in risk behaviors, if there is some plasticity in it. So we ran this model. This is a huge model, but I'm going to go immediately to the results. And what you can see is that there is variability. Some children always think about the future. This is a group of kids, about 300 kids, many of them. Some of them, as they and I forgot to say, all of them were maltreated. So some of them are going down, not doing so well. And there is a group that is actually going up. And when we looked at the differences in the experiences that they have, we actually look at multiple levels. We looked how social work support they got. We looked how they fare in the family. We looked how they fare with their peers. And they're really explaining these models. And what's really interesting is that the group that actually, we can call it a recovery group, or low start increasing, it was called in the article, did in some respects better than those that were always future-oriented and high. Meaning that if you grow through adversity, you, in the end of, and we checked 10 years later, I can show you the outcomes, right here. We looked at different milestones. We did how they did in terms of independent living skills, social capital, income, total employment. So these kids at age between 18 and on did better than even those that were future-oriented all the time. So that kind of invited us to think about the concept of stealing, how you get stronger over time from experiencing adversity, and the intersection in biology. This is another study that is collecting the autonomic nervous system. And the idea is whether parenting, we have a tendency, as I said, to look at bad thing leading to a bad outcome. But sometimes there is differential response to the environment. And just because of biological differences. And one of them is the autonomic nervous system. And here you can see, I'm going to go directly to the finding, that indicators of the autonomic nervous system, indicators of autonomic nervous system differentially explain how harsh parenting are related to aggression and delinquency. In other words, the same harsh parenting created differential response depending on how the self-regulation capacity of these children is. And even, continue with the idea of resilience, we looked at positive outcome, not just aggression and delinquency. We looked at their ability to orient towards the future, and we saw this differential response. And that leads to the last concept, as a hormesis, that that is coined in pharmacological sciences and toxicology. And the idea is that we are, as you can see, I'm kind of leading to it, one aspect of resilience is that we build through adversity. And it's not new. It's, Michael Rotter coined that as stealing in the 70s already. The nice thing about hormesis is that it provides a model that you can actually test it a little bit more rigorously, statistically, and operationalize it when you work with human beings. I'm just going to show you in a nutshell what happens. The idea is that if you take hormesis, which is a biphasic response, dose response of environmental toxin to the organism, if we will translate it to human behavior, is it's a curvilinear response to environmental stress, where when we have low levels of stress, there is a positive response. When we have overwhelming stress, it starts to overwhelm the system and the individual is kind of collapsing and maladaptively responding. So in other words, you can see it over time. Behavioral adjustment problems are right here in the y-axis, and over time, you can see that the dose of exposure to here the toxin would be a psychosocial stressor, let's say harsh, parenting, rearing environment, or maybe poverty, and that's debatable because that needs to be investigated. You can see that there is a point, where we call it a threshold, where experiencing these experiences is actually leading to damaging effect, irreversible effect. In our lab, we wanted to test it with the Human Connector project. We showed that perceived stress, we used how people perceive themselves in stress, its relationship to cognition, to their intelligence, different component in their intelligence, is best explained if you actually put it in an aromatic curve. And you see that, I can show you here, that when you are looking at perceived stress, very little perception of stress is actually helpful for fluid cognition and crystallized cognition, and that is associated with life satisfaction. And the shape is right here. You can see that the more you increase in perceived stress, it's actually improve intelligence and fluid cognition. And there is a point where it's kind of collapsing the system, and that doesn't work anymore. In my lab, we are also looking at parenting, intrusiveness, and coercion. And you can see that intrusiveness and coercion are two forms of bad parenting, we call bad parenting or adverse parenting. I'm finishing. And you can see that it's surprisingly, at low level, it was actually helpful for the kids, and gradually it's changing to, so here, I'm finishing up. Last slide.
Just trying to stress you a little bit.
Yeah, good. So, it's hormetic until you push me out. So, in the last model, you can see what biological sensitivity context is playing out, where also response to positive environment can be exacerbated or can be intensified by biological condition. So, we're thinking about some biological conditions, autonomic nervous system, that create risk, where we are really responding bad to a bad environment. We also can respond very well or adaptively if we have the right biological condition. I wanted to say thank you to the founders, National Institute of Drug Abuse, all the data set that's based on, collaborators right here, and the graduate student that you saw through the presentation. Thank you.
Thank you.
For being here.